also know that Washington, D.C. will never fix itself. The Founding Fathers recognized that this was a potential as well.
Good evening and welcome to the rest of the news. We have a tremendous program set up for you today. Our special guest is Jim Twisdale.
Correct.
And this is Jim Twisdale from Lexington.
Well, I live in Lancaster, just south of Lexington.
Jim is the Kentucky State Director for the Convention of States. Is that right?
That's correct, yes. I've been serving in that position for the past 2 years. It's a volunteer position that I applied for, and I was fortunate to be selected.
That's terrific. Now, tell us, why is a Convention of States important?
The Convention of States matter that we are pursuing has to do with Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution. Article 5 allows the U.S. Constitution to be amended. That's the single section within that constitutional area that where the federal government can amend it. We've done that 27 times through the U.S. Congress, but we've never done it through a Convention of States. That's the second method of amending the Constitution. And our organization is all about trying to bring together 2/3 of the states to deal with amending that Constitution in 3 important subject areas.
Okay, tell us those.
3 areas that we are proposing as in our application is the first one is to impose fiscal restraints on the federal government. That particular subject area could come up with 2 or 3 different amendments. One example would be a balanced budget amendment. Another example might be they could change the way that we're taxed. Instead of income tax, they could write an amendment saying that we're going to be taxed on a fair tax system or on a sales tax system. The second subject area is to limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. That could generate amendments that could deal with the abuse of the regulations. Right now, regulations are written by bureaucrats. They're not approved by the people that actually write it, the Congress people within the U.S. Senate.
Well, in other words, the Obama administration is basically shutting down the coal industry here in Kentucky, and there's a huge number of people without a job, and
Exactly.
It's just a horrible thing. And the price of heating your house or running your business is all going up because
of these regulations,
which are aimed at putting people out of business.
Exactly, and that's
this could deal with that.
Absolutely, yeah, regulation can be easily changed. It's not law; the law is already there in the books. They could instruct the government agency that's in charge of that regulation to rewrite it so that it would not be so detrimental to the Kentucky coal industry or all coal industry. So that's how the federal government can use their power, is through these regulations. And so this amendment, or this subject area,
would limit some of that.
Absolutely. It would put more restrictions on the federal government on what they can write and who approves it.
Yeah, that's great.
It is cool.
And
yeah.
What is the third thing?
Third one is term limits.
Okay.
And we would like to see term limits imposed upon Congress people within the federal government and our senators.
Yeah.
And possibly Supreme Court justices.
Right.
Well.
Right. Well, I used to worry about that because if we ever get a good congressman, I'd like to keep him. But I can see that really the Founding Fathers envisioned citizen leaders
Absolutely.
that would go in there and quit their job for a couple of years and then come back and let somebody else go in there.
That's right, yeah. That's exactly how our Founding Fathers envisioned it. They did not see it as a full-time job or a career. It was go in, you serve your time, you make a difference, and you get back out and you continue your life in the private sector.
Right, and the other thing, it seems to me, the longer the politicians are in Washington, D.C., the more corrupt they get.
Absolutely. Power, when you're in for a long period of time, you get to know people. And you build this, security of knowledge and what have you around you, and it makes you secure, and you become, possibly more corrupt, and it does happen.
Well, now I've seen, internet websites and things about Convention of States, and it says, our government is more or less totally corrupt now, and it's not going to fix itself because you have these vested interests. So the only way you can fix it is if the people, for example, those that voted for Trump, would rise up and demand that they drain the swamp.
Exactly. And this is the perfect method for doing it. It's all in the Constitution. It was authority given to us by our founding fathers. The founding fathers knew that the federal government could become corrupt. That's why there's two methods to amend the Constitution. They knew if the federal government grew corrupt, they're not going to fix themselves.
No.
They're not going to pass amendments to fix the problems they have created.
Yeah.
So the only way to do that is through a convention of states. The states have to come together again because the states originally formed the Constitution. We're the ones that gave the federal government the power. Now it's time to go back and reassess that through this convention of states and make these amendments and bring the federal government back under control.
Now, I've heard people say, really, the federal government's so corrupt that you could say we don't have a constitution right now.
Yeah.
It's just been totally put on its head. For example, the separation of church and state, which is not in the Constitution, and it was written in that letter to Thomas Jefferson saying that the government should not control the church and keep the church down and out of government. Right. And now it's used to keep the church out of the government.
Right.
It really was meant to keep the government out of the church.
Right.
So they've totally turned it upside down, and it's doing just the opposite of what the founding fathers wanted.
Exactly. Yeah, and, again, the convention of states would be a step towards fixing that.
Yeah.
Of those three subject areas, we probably couldn't get to it right away, but it would put us in the right track to give notice to the federal government that we're not going to continue to tolerate abuses. So we make these initial changes, and then if that's successful, we'll go forward with maybe a second convention of states to take on that issue.
And it seems to me that in order for the convention of states to take place, you got to get states that have the House and the Senate both controlled by Republicans.
Yes,
usually.
Yes, that is. Regretfully, that is the case that we're experiencing throughout the entire country, where we have Republicans that control both chambers of the institution. There, they favor a convention of states. We have 8 states that have passed our application. Those states have been controlled by Republican parties. And so, regretfully, very few Democrats come over and see the light. Now, we did get one Democrat this past year when our resolution here in Kentucky, HJR 44, that was introduced by Representative Jim DeCesare and Representative Stan Lee and a couple others. We did get one Democrat that came on board. So we had a joint resolution. We had up to 19 co-sponsors on that resolution.
Really?
The problem is that
Greg Stumbo.
Yeah, exactly. He would not allow our resolution to be heard in committee. Very disappointing.
Well, he wouldn't let, some people would say he wouldn't let any of the important resolutions be heard in committee because he wants to
keep control
of everything. But
well, you live by the sword,
he's gone.
You die by the sword. So he's gone now. So yes.
And you say he didn't even win his own county.
He did not. He's completely out.
So I mean, it's very encouraging that the people of Kentucky have risen up and say, we want our government back.
Exactly. This is what happened. Now we have a supermajority in the House of Representatives here in Frankfort. I think it's 64 Republicans now.
Yeah.
And that is just fantastic.
Unbelievable. It's a miracle.
And we're seeing more and more Republican control throughout the entire nation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Under President Obama, Democrats have suffered drastically. They have lost power throughout the entire country. People don't realize this. They have lost power, and now they lost both chambers in the U.S. Congress.
Yeah. Really? So what other states have the Republicans in charge of the House and the Senate?
Well, I don't know exactly all of them offhand, but I can tell you the states that we have passed, for example, Florida, Georgia, and Alaska. Those are the first three states that passed our application, all Republican-controlled. Then Alabama came on board, and then this past year, four more states came on board: Tennessee, Louisiana, Oklahoma. Forget the last one here. There's one more state. Escapes my memory here. Indiana. I guess it was Indiana.
Oh, Indiana too.
Just north of us, Indiana, passed it. So we're very hopeful that we'll continue this trend as we move forward. So we've made huge progress now, and I think maybe 2, 3, 4 more years, we should easily hit that magic number of 34 states.
Need 34.
34 states in order for us to call the convention. Under Article 5, you need 2/3 of the states to submit an application calling for a convention of states. And that 2/3 is actually 34 states.
Yeah.
And we think that's a reachable number that we can have it.
Well, I've been watching the news a little bit and getting emails, and this election that put Trump over the top, it shocked me, and it shocked a lot of other people. They can't believe what happened.
Yeah, they can't.
But in retrospect, it looks like the people of the United States are fed up with the lies and the corruption in big government that is shutting down all the jobs and, trying to control everybody and everything. And they say, hey, we are going to stand and take our country back.
Exactly. Our organization actually came out of another organization called Citizens for Self-Governance, which is run by Mark Meckler. He is basically the founder of the Convention of States. And his organization is all about people having self-control over themselves, over their government.
Yeah.
And a wonderful guy. He's been on Fox News many, many times, on various other television shows, I think CNN as well.
Is it Mike Meckler?
Mark Meckler. And through his advocation and others, we have a lot of people that support us. A lot of conservative talk show hosts. Glenn Beck, for example, supports us. Mark Levin is a big supporter of us. Sean Hannity supports us. Governor-wise, we have Governor Abbott in Texas, the current governor there, huge advocate for an Article 5 Convention of States.
Well, things have gotten so bad that I think anyone that realizes how bad the situation is and how corrupt our government is would want to see something done about it.
Exactly.
The people are being kicked out, so they have very little say at all. And this is one open door that God has opened that's going to let the people get back and have, like you call, self-governance.
Yes.
Now, Mark Meckler helped to start
Tea Party
Patriots.
He did. Yes. He was part of that initial process, which went very well, but he decided to go on his own because he had other ideas. One of course, being Convention of States, which now, we're nationwide. Not only have we gotten these 8 states that have passed it, we've been able to introduce our application in 44 other states. Historic. Never been done before, ever in the history of our country.
Well, now, Jim, it seems to me that a lot of people are confused about this Convention of States. They think it's a constitutional convention.
Correct.
And they don't see the difference, and they're afraid, and they're confused. And I wonder if you could try to straighten us all out a little bit on how a Convention of States is different and safer than a constitutional convention.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the message that our opponents put out, that if a Convention of States happens, then it's going to end up to be a runaway convention, or turn into a constitutional convention. Those are the 2 scenarios they'll say will happen when a Convention of States comes together. That's virtually impossible. It's impossible. There are a bunch of safeguards
yeah,
that we have in place. The first one, and the most important one, is that a convention of states is authorized only to amend the Constitution under Article 5. It does not give authority to that convention to go any further. All they can do is propose amendments. Propose. That's it. Propose.
And then after they're proposed, and if they pass the convention of states, then they have to go back to the states
and be ratified.
And be ratified by
38 states. Under the Constitution, even though they have proposals, they can come up with 1 to 10 different amendment proposals. That's all it is, proposals. Then all that's turned over back to Congress. And the second role of Congress under Article 5 is to send it out to be ratified.
So that it's, like you say, essentially impossible that anything would get passed without the states knowing it and approving it.
Absolutely. It takes 38 states to pass it, only 13 say no. So it's an uphill battle for this to even happen, even after the convention happens. It's still an uphill battle. So these are terrific safeguards put in by our founding fathers. And you have several other safeguards. Also, one being that it's limited. A convention of states must be limited to the application. So those 3 subject areas that I talked about, it's limited to that. They can't go and create, for example,
the Second Amendment, get rid of that
exactly.
or something. It's impossible.
It's impossible. Cannot do it. It's out of scope. All attorneys would tell you, anything out of scope cannot be addressed. And furthermore, if they try to do that and say they wrote some type of crazy amendment saying, we're getting rid of your gun rights, which would never happen, but they did that, the Congress wouldn't send it out to be ratified because it's out of scope. The Congress would say, well, wait a minute, guys. Your application said these 3 subject areas. It said nothing about Second Amendment reversal or what have you. So therefore, you're out of scope, and we're not going to send that out to be ratified.
They wouldn't even send it out.
And
of course, it would never pass. What is it, 2/3 of the states?
And they had 3/4.
3/4?
3/4. 38 states would have to agree to. That's not going to happen.
No.
We got too many gun-loving states out there.
Okay, well, I think that's very important, and I think you did an excellent job to explain. Really, it's just going to give the people more of the power that the founding fathers gave us in the first place, but big government and the corruption in Washington has tried to steal it from the people.
They have.
And so we're going to try to, with this convention of states, we're trying to get some of the control back to the people.
Exactly. The states are sovereign in their own right. That's why you have a governor and you have a body of senators and representatives in each of the 50 states because they're sovereign. They create their own laws.
Yeah. And
we forget that. We think the whole world revolves around the federal government. Well, it doesn't. The states created the federal government. By making the Constitution, which is a contract. All that is a contract between the states and the federal government. What we have put down in the Constitution. And the states at any time can rise up and change that contract. And this is the Article 5 allows us to modify that contract.
Well, it sounds to me that that's exactly what we need. I think this is very important, and I think this is something that has clarified it a lot, and wish you the best of.
Thank you. May I give my phone number?
Please do, yeah.
You're welcome to give me a call if you want to talk about more about it, if you want to volunteer, become involved in our leadership with it here in the state. Again, my name is Jim Twisdale. It's Twisdale. My cell number is 859-304-1899. And my email address is james.twisdale, that's Twisdale, at cosaction, all one word, cosaction.com. So you're welcome to email me, give me a call. I'll be more than happy to go over more details with you on what we're about. We think we're going to have success this year in Kentucky. We made a lot of progress this past session in 2017 when that opens up. I'll be in Frankfurt often, meeting with the representatives and senators, again, trying to get them to sponsor and co-sponsor We're confident we're going to have Representative Jim DeCesare and Stan Lee again. They've already committed to me that they will sponsor our resolution again. But we're hoping we'll have one happening in the Senate side as well. So I'm working on that angle to make that happen. So we're investigating that.
Okay, Jim, I wonder if you could go over some of these ideas that are opposed to the Convention of States.
Sure. Yeah, we have some organizations out there that are against a Convention of States, and we know what their arguments are. Of course, the one we talked about already about the Constitutional Convention, a runaway convention, we talked about that. Another one they throw at us is that, well, they think nullification is the better way to go because that way you're not messing with the Constitution at all. Well, nullification is basically a strategy to go against any unconstitutional law that is proposed by Congress. For example, recently the Supreme Court said that marriage between a man and a woman is constitutional. They have a constitutional right. Many people disagree that that is not in the Constitution.
Right.
Well, nullification then would come into play. States that would agree that that's an unconstitutional position to take. States would say, we disagree with that. We're not going to honor that. That's nullification. However, we never see it actually exercised. States would disagree with it, but they still end up falling in line in doing what the government says.
I mean, look at the Congress. They have done all kinds. Look at the abortion ruling and separation of church and state and all of these things. Well, Congress has never seemed to had the wherewithal to oppose it.
Exactly. Not Congress, but the states to oppose it. That's what nullification is.
The state government.
Yeah. I'll give you a little history lesson here. Back in the early 60s, Governor Wallace opposed the law that integrated the schools. He stood up in front of the schools and said, we're never going to allow the schools to be integrated. We're opposing that. That was nullification on his part. He was nullifying that because he thought it was unconstitutional for them to do that. What happened was the federal government sent in the National Guard, and they forced compliance. So nullification doesn't work because the federal government will bring all its power and might to bear to bring that state back under control. Another example where nullification could have been used but was not was the Obamacare ruling by Supreme Court, where they said it was, in fact, constitutional because it was a tax.
Yeah.
Well, that was just silly. Everybody knew that wasn't the case. So the states, they could have nullified. They could all have come together and said, we don't think that's a constitutional position that you can take, but they didn't. They just fell in line. So nullification is not a good strategy. All it does, at best, it stops a bad law, but it doesn't fix laws. So that's another one. Another argument we hear is you just vote better people in the office. That's something the Tea Party kind of endorses. They think if they just get better candidates to run, they're going to have better outcomes, and that's a good strategy. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem, though, is it doesn't work. We know through history that people, once they get in the office, they get reelected 90% of the time. So we tend to go with name recognition. We go with people that, to us, have been proven successful in one way or the other, and we end up with politicians in office for 30 years and longer.
Right.
So voting better people in office doesn't work, and that just is not a common sense way to go.
It may help a little bit, but it's not adequate.
It's nothing wrong with trying it. We all should vote for the better person, but regretfully, we don't have that good outcome.
So if somebody gets elected, even though they're not doing a good job, they tend to get reelected over and over and over and over again.
Yep. And another one here that I talk about is that and I hear this often when I do presentations to groups, is that, well, why bother amending the Constitution because the federal government doesn't follow it anyway? And you got to pause and give that some thought. And I can understand where these people are coming from, but in reality, we do follow the Constitution. But regretfully, it's been morphed into a completely different document over the decades by Supreme Court. So when the Supreme Court comes out and says now marriage is is between two men and two women, when it wasn't in the Supreme Court before, now it's law of the land, and we do follow it. So Supreme Court, the Constitution is followed through Supreme Court interpretations.
And like you say, if somebody says, well, we're not going to follow it, boom, here come the National Guard.
Absolutely.
Or
they'll rain living hell down on that state to ensure they comply.
Well, yeah, like the bathroom bill, where they wanted to put men in the girls' showers and all that stuff.
Yep.
Well, he says, well, if you don't like it, we're going to take all your funding away from it.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, wonderful.
That's how corrupt the government has gotten. They have this kind of power over the states, and the states need to come together. This is an excellent reason why we have to come together and have a convention of states and start reining in the out of control.
And come together. So one state is not going to do it, but if you get a bunch of states, they may be able to stick together and bring the Constitution back.
Absolutely. Another argument I hear when I do presentations is who are we going to send to these conventions? Say we get the 34 states. Who's going to go to this convention and represent Kentucky, for example?
Yeah.
Right? That's a good question. And the answer is the state will decide. Each state will determine who they send. And what they're going to do is they're going to pass a law for the process of making that determination. They could select the governor if they want to. They could select their own House of Representatives. They could have a special election to have citizens run to become commissioners and represent the state.
Yeah.
So it's up to each individual state to determine who goes.
Okay. Well, I guess we're about out of time, but I think that you've done an excellent job on explaining all of this and why it's so important. So thank you very much, Jim Twisdale. Okay, thank you very much. God bless you, and tune in again next week for the rest of the news.
Thank you.
If you have one out-of-control Supreme Court, one out-of-control Congress, and one out-of-control president, there's nowhere to go. And that's the problem, unless we go back to the Constitution to save the Constitution. So what are we going to do about it?
Now, the biggest tool in the box is this Article 5.
This is the method the Constitution gives the states to try to rein in the federal government.
There are a bunch of us who are coming together to make this happen.
I want to help rein in a federal government that's running amok.
The only way we're going to save this republic, I believe, is to get about the process of the states regaining and recontrolling the federal government, because it is the states that created the federal government. It is the states.
The states have the power under Article 5 to call a convention of the states for the purpose of proposing amendments to the Constitution. Because sometimes what you need is not a change of personnel, you need a change of structure. The founders understood the importance of structure.